2,600,000 years ago, the Earth entered an age of ice. Glaciers expanded across continents, oceans shifted, and climates swung between bitter cold and brief warmth. Humanity emerged into this harsh world, fragile and untested, forced to adapt or perish. The landscape was unforgiving. Frozen plains stretched for hundreds of miles, forests receded, and rivers carved their slow paths through the frost. Early humans learned to hunt enormous beasts, gather scarce plants, and create fire to survive nights that could freeze breath into icicles. Every step, every decision mattered. This was a world of scarcity, danger, and relentless change. Life depended on cooperation, innovation, and endurance. Through millennia of cold, famine, and migration, humans learned to read the rhythms of the earth, to anticipate the movements of animals, and to endure winters that could last lifetimes. The ice shaped their bodies, minds, and societies, leaving marks still visible today. This is the story of survival against the frozen world, of ingenuity born from necessity, and of a species pushed to the brink by endless ice ages. Sorry for the interruption. Where are you tuning in from? Drop it in the comments. 2.6 million years ago, the world entered an age unlike any it had known before. The Pleistocene, a time when ice ruled the planet. Vast sheets of frozen water, miles thick, crept across the northern continents. They advanced and retreated in endless cycles, reshaping the land beneath them. Mountains were carved sharper, valleys were gouged deeper, and entire regions vanished beneath blankets of white that stretched beyond the horizon. The air was colder, drier, harsher than anything our species would later know. Glaciers locked away water, dropping sea levels by hundreds of feet. Coastlines extended far out into what are now oceans. Land bridges appeared, connecting continents that today remain divided. A frozen world, ever shifting, ever unstable, demanded resilience from every living creature that tried to endure it. For our early human ancestors, this was the stage of survival. They were not yet the masters of the earth. They were vulnerable, fragile beings facing an unforgiving climate. The rhythm of life was dictated not by the turning of seasons but by the grinding advance and retreat of the ice itself. When glaciers surged southward, they pushed herds and hunters alike into smaller, tighter refuges. When the ice retreated, grasslands and rivers opened, and people moved again into new frontiers. The cold was relentless. Winters lasted longer, summers were short and mild, and storms carried biting winds across the plains. In these frozen landscapes, survival meant constant adaptation. Fire became more than a tool. It was salvation. A flicker of warmth in a world that could freeze bone and breath. Around small hearths, humans huddled together, sharing warmth, food, and the fragile hope of making it through another night. Life in this age was never secure. Food was scarce and unpredictable. Herds of great animals roamed the land, but following them meant hardship and danger. The woolly mammoth, towering and armored with thick fur, offered immense reward but demanded skill and courage to hunt. The giant bison, the woolly rhinoceros, the saber-toothed cats, all were both threats and opportunities. To face them required teamwork, tools, and a constant awareness that one mistake could mean death. The landscape itself was a challenge. Rivers shifted as glaciers melted and froze again. Forests gave way to tundra, then returned centuries later. Familiar hunting grounds disappeared beneath advancing ice, forcing entire groups to wander in search of new refuge. To live in the Pleistocene was to never stand still. The earth itself seemed alive, breathing with the slow rhythm of ice. Periods of warmth would come, brief interludes where grasslands spread, animals multiplied, and humans thrived. But the ice always returned, creeping southward like a predator reclaiming its ground. These cycles of glacial and interglacial periods defined human existence for nearly 2 million years. In this world of ice, humanity was tested again and again, not through luxury or abundance, but through scarcity, danger, and loss. Each generation carried forward not only their bodies, but the memory of survival, written in stone tools, in fire, in the shared knowledge of how to endure the cold. The Pleistocene shaped us, hardened us, and pushed us to the very edge of extinction more than once. This was the world that gave rise to humanity. A world of ice. A world of struggle. A world that demanded everything from those who wished to live within it. The world of the Pleistocene was never still. Ice did not simply arrive and remain. It advanced, retreated, and returned again in an endless rhythm that defined the lives of every creature caught in its path. These cycles, stretching across tens of thousands of years, were not random. They followed the quiet pull of the heavens, the long and steady patterns of Earth's orbit around the Sunday. At times, the planet tilted more steeply, catching less warmth in northern latitudes. At other times, its orbit stretched into a wider ellipse, carrying the Earth farther from the Sun for part of the year. Even the wobble of our axis, slow and invisible, played its part. Together, these subtle movements created the great pulses of climate that built and destroyed the ice sheets. Scientists call them Milankovitch cycles, but to our ancestors they were simply the unpredictable breath of the world. When glaciers advanced, the landscape transformed. Grasslands shrank, forests withered, and deserts spread across continents. Sea levels dropped, exposing new land but cutting away fertile coastlines. Whole regions became uninhabitable, forcing human groups to abandon their homes. With each shift, survival meant movement. Families followed herds, chased fresh water, and searched for plants that could still grow in the thin soil of the cold earth. Then, slowly, the ice would retreat. Warmer centuries brought rains, rivers, and abundance. Grass returned, trees spread across valleys, and animals flourished. In these interglacial periods, humans grew in number, explored new lands, and left behind traces of art, tools, and culture. But the warmth never lasted. Within a few thousand years, the cycle turned again, and the ice began to march back across the land. For humanity, this rhythm was both opportunity and trap. The cold forced innovation, better tools, stronger shelters, clothing stitched from hides, fires carefully tended. The warmth allowed expansion, trade, and the flowering of ideas. Yet no stability endured. Just as groups found balance, the climate shifted, and what was once abundant became scarce again. This constant change meant that no generation lived in the same world as the one before. Children grew up watching rivers dry or glaciers creep closer to their hunting grounds. Elders remembered landscapes that no longer existed. The land itself was always in motion, never fully trusted. The rhythm of glaciers shaped not only the environment, but the very character of our species. It demanded adaptability, resilience, and the ability to imagine futures beyond the present. In a world of endless cycles, where ice and warmth traded places like opposing rulers, humanity learned the most important lesson of all. Survival was not about comfort, but about change. For early humans, survival in the icy world was never guaranteed. The cold could strip away strength, numb the body, and take life in silence. But in the midst of this harsh environment, one discovery changed everything. Fire. It was not simply a flame. It was warmth, safety, and a new way to endure winters that seemed endless. At first, fire was a gift taken from nature itself. Lightning split the sky, striking dry grass and sparking blazes that tore across the land. Volcanic eruptions poured out heat and flame. Humans watched, feared, and then learned. They carried embers from dying fires, sheltered them, and kept them alive as though protecting the very heartbeat of their group. Over time, they learned to create fire for themselves. Sparks struck from stone. Embers coaxed into life with breath. Twigs and bark carefully fed until flames grew strong. This control of fire marked a turning point in the story of humanity. Fire gave warmth against the freezing winds. Around it, families gathered, no longer helpless against the dark. It extended the day, pushing back the shadows that once drove people to huddle in silence. With fire, nights became safer, less lonely, less cold. It allowed survival in regions where the chill of winter would have otherwise meant death. But fire was more than heat. It transformed food. Raw meat, tough roots, and grains became softer, richer, easier to digest. Cooking unlocked new energy, fueling bodies and brains that demanded more than ever before. Around the hearth, humans not only ate better, they grew stronger, lived longer, and found time for thought and story. Fire also offered protection. Predators that once ruled the night now kept their distance. The glowing circle of light was a boundary that wolves, lions, and saber-toothed cats rarely dared to cross. With fire, humans carved out safe spaces in a dangerous world, claiming the night as their own. The presence of fire shaped communities. It was not carried alone. It was shared. Kept alive together, guarded with care, and passed from one generation to the next. The hearth became the center of human life, a place where warmth and memory met. Flames lit faces as stories were told, skills were taught, and traditions were born. In the frozen world of the Pleistocene, fire was not just a tool, it was a companion, a fragile light in the darkness that made endurance possible. It gave humanity the power to face winters that would have crushed them. It sparked more than flames. It sparked the possibility of a future. In a world ruled by ice and sudden change, survival demanded more than fire. The cold winds of the Pleistocene carried storms that could bury the land in snow and twist the air into freezing gales. Without protection, even the strongest body would wither. Shelter became the second great ally of humanity. It was the shield that allowed fragile beings to endure when the elements raged outside. At first, shelter was found rather than built. Caves offered dark and steady refuge. Their stone walls held warmth from fires, and their ceilings kept out snow and rain. Early humans followed herds into valleys and discovered hollows in cliffs, places where they could rest without the bite of the wind. These natural sanctuaries were not always safe. Other predators claimed them too. Lions, bears, and hyenas had long ruled these spaces. To claim a cave meant risk and courage. Yet once secured, it gave a family the strength to last through the hardest nights. Beyond caves, overhanging rocks and narrow gorges offered shelter. These spaces were less permanent, but they provided cover when journeys stretched too far from home. Here, fires burned against stone walls, smoke curling into the sky, marking where humans had learned to carve out small circles of safety in a world of exposure. In time, humans began to shape their own dwellings. Branches and animal hides formed crude tents. Bones of mammoths, set into the earth, became frames for great shelters covered with fur. These constructions were fragile compared to the walls of a cave, but they were mobile. They allowed hunters to move with herds, carrying protection with them across open plains. This step was more than practical. It showed a shift in thinking. Humans no longer waited for nature to offer a home. They built their own. Inside these shelters, life gathered close. Fires flickered at the center. Walls blocked the wind. Families huddled together, their voices echoing softly against stone or hide. The shelter was not just physical. It was emotional. It offered a place of belonging, a refuge where the chaos of storms could be shut out, if only for a time. Shelter also gave time. Time to rest, to plan, to shape tools, to teach the young. It allowed survival beyond mere reaction. Within walls, however humble, humans could think about tomorrow instead of only fearing the night. As the Ice Age storms swept across continents, tearing at the land and chilling the air, humanity endured. Not only because of fire, but because they learned to find and to build protection. Shelter was the fortress of the weak against the power of nature, and in every cave, every tent of hide and bone, humanity's determination grew stronger. During the Pleistocene, humans shared the earth with giants. Mammoths, mastodons, woolly rhinoceroses, and giant deer roamed the frozen landscapes. These creatures were immense, strong, and often dangerous. For early humans, they were both threat and opportunity. The meat, fat, and hides of these animals could sustain families for months. But hunting them required courage, skill, and above all, cooperation. A single human could not bring down a mammoth. Even a group without strategy would likely fail. Early hunters learned to work together. They studied the habits of the animals. They observed herds, tracked migration routes, and noted the signs of breeding and feeding. Each movement had to be calculated. Every attack planned. Success depended on precision as much as bravery. Tools became essential. Stone-tipped spears, wooden throwing sticks, and later, bone and antler implements allowed humans to reach beyond the limits of their strength. They dug pits, set traps, and created ambushes. Hunters drove animals toward narrow valleys or frozen rivers, using the terrain to their advantage. The giant beasts were powerful, but their size could be turned against them. Hunting was more than killing. It was a test of knowledge and endurance. Teams communicated silently, passing signals across the snow and ice. Timing was critical. One mistake could injure or kill a hunter. The stakes were high, but the rewards were life itself. A successful hunt provided meat, fat for fuel, hides for clothing, and bones for shelter and tools. These were not luxuries. They were necessities in a world where cold could kill as surely as hunger. Survival also depended on learning from the dead. Each hunt left lessons written in scars, broken spears, and the remains of animals. Young hunters watched elders, imitating movements, memorizing patterns, absorbing the knowledge that could keep them alive. Knowledge became as vital as strength and passed from generation to generation. Hunting giants shaped human society. It demanded cooperation, communication, and trust. It created social bonds and hierarchies based on skill and wisdom. Around fires, hunters shared stories of the day, passing on strategy, warning of dangers, and celebrating triumphs. In the shadow of the Ice Age, these lessons became survival itself. The age of megafauna was a world of risk and reward, of fear and exhilaration. Humans survived not by dominating, but by understanding. By observing, planning, and working together. Every mammoth brought danger, but also the means to endure. Every hunt strengthened the bonds of family and community. In facing giants, humanity learned its first lesson. Survival was never solitary. It was shared, deliberate, and hard-won. During the deepest ice ages, food was never guaranteed. Glaciers covered vast expanses of land, and the animals that humans relied on became fewer, more scattered, or vanished entirely from familiar hunting grounds. The Pleistocene world was one of scarcity, and survival depended on ingenuity as much as strength. Humans had to find sustenance where others could not. Bone marrow became a prized resource. The dense, fatty tissue hidden within the skeletons of animals provided calories, nutrition, and energy when meat was scarce. Early humans learned to crack bones with stones, extracting marrow that could sustain them through bitter winters. Each fragment of nourishment was precious. Nothing could be wasted. Every scrap mattered. Roots and tubers offered another lifeline. Buried beneath frozen soil, they were hidden treasures that required knowledge and careful extraction. Early humans discovered which plants were edible, how to dig them safely, and how to store them for lean times. Seeds, small and often overlooked, were collected in great numbers. They could be ground into coarse flour, mixed with water or fat, and transformed into a simple but sustaining meal. Hunting became a delicate balance. Herds were smaller, migrations unpredictable, and the risk of failure ever present. Every hunt carried danger. A missed opportunity could mean days without substantial nourishment. Humans learned to track patterns of seasons and animal behavior, moving with precision and timing their efforts to the changing landscape. Seasonal hunts dictated survival, forcing groups to travel, adapt, and sometimes risk the harshest elements for the reward of fresh meat. Despite these strategies, hunger was a constant companion. Children grew slowly, adults were lean, and illness could strike easily when calories were insufficient. Early humans learned to ration carefully, sharing what they could, preserving energy as much as food. Survival was a matter of calculation, endurance, and patience. The fragile diet of the Ice Age shaped human bodies and communities. Knowledge of plants, animals, and storage became essential. Social bonds strengthened as groups relied on cooperation for food gathering and protection. Skills were taught early. Survival strategies passed from elders to children with precision. Each successful meal was a triumph, a temporary victory over a world defined by scarcity. In this delicate balance, humanity learned resilience. The fragile diet demanded constant vigilance, creativity, and adaptation. Every bite mattered, every season tested the body and mind, and every winter reminded humans that survival was never certain. Yet, despite the thin margin for error, humans endured. They persisted through the scarcity, building the knowledge, tools, and strategies that would carry them forward into the next great challenges of the Ice Age. The remains of long-extinct animals tell a story that words alone cannot capture. In the frozen soils of the Pleistocene, bones became more than remnants of life. They became blueprints, recording the struggles and strategies of humans striving to survive in a harsh and unforgiving world. Every fracture, every cut mark, every worn edge of stone offers a glimpse into the daily reality of Ice Age life. When archaeologists examine a butchered mammoth or a fractured reindeer bone, they see evidence of planning and precision. Early humans did not strike blindly. They studied the anatomy of their prey, learning where the flesh was thickest, where marrow could be extracted, and how to minimize effort while maximizing sustenance. Cuts along joints, the splitting of long bones, and the scraping of hides reveal careful consideration. These were not random acts. They were methods honed over generations, passed from one hunter to the next as knowledge vital to survival. Stone tools were equally telling. Hand axes, scrapers, and chisels shaped from flint or bone were worn and polished from repeated use. The edges bear the marks of thousands of tasks: cutting meat, slicing hides, shaping wood, cracking bones. Each tool reflects a human mind adapting to the environment, solving problems, and extending its reach. The combination of tool and bone tells a story of dependency. Humans relied on animals not only for food but for clothing, shelter, and implements. The frozen plains offered few alternatives, making every kill essential, every use meticulous. Bones also record the harshness of life. Signs of fractures, healed injuries, and worn teeth reveal the physical toll of survival. Adults bore the marks of relentless labor, bending over carcasses, dragging meat across ice and snow, or huddling in wind-swept shelters. Children learned early the weight of these realities, observing elders, imitating movements, and understanding that life demanded skill, patience, and endurance. Beyond sustenance, bones provided insight into social cooperation. Coordinating hunts, dividing resources, and sharing the spoils required communication and trust. Cut marks often show patterns suggesting group activity, multiple hands working in tandem. Survival was never solitary. It depended on collective knowledge, shared effort, and careful planning. In the silent testimony of bones, Ice Age humans speak across millennia. The archaeological record is not just evidence of survival. It is a chronicle of intelligence, adaptation, and dependence on a fragile world. Every mark, every tool, every fragment of animal life tells us how humans endured, learned, and shaped themselves in response to the unforgiving rhythm of the ice. These remnants are more than relics. They are blueprints of resilience, etched in bone and stone, offering insight into a world where life was fragile and survival demanded ingenuity. The Ice Age was written not only on the land but on the human body. Skeletal remains reveal a story of endurance and suffering, a record of the harsh realities of a world gripped by cold. The frozen climate demanded resilience, and every fracture, every deformation, and every worn bone speaks of the price humanity paid to survive. Malnutrition was a constant companion. Limited food sources, seasonal scarcity, and the ever-present threat of failed hunts left children and adults alike with stunted growth. Skeletal analysis shows that early humans were shorter than their descendants, their bones thinner, their joints often underdeveloped. Signs of enamel hypoplasia lines etched across teeth reveal periods of childhood stress, times when nutrition was insufficient and survival depended on sheer endurance. The body responded to the cold and scarcity by conserving energy, slowing growth, and prioritizing vital functions. Frostbite and exposure also left lasting marks. Fingers, toes, and extremities often show evidence of healed injuries, indicating repeated exposure to freezing temperatures. The cold could claim tissue as easily as life, yet humans adapted, learning to protect themselves with hides, fire, and shelter. Even so, the evidence shows that frostbite was common, a reminder of how close the margins of survival truly were. The skeletons of early humans also reveal chronic stress. Knees, hips, and spines bear signs of repeated strain, a reflection of hours spent bending over fires, dragging carcasses, or walking long distances across snow and ice. Enthesopathies, changes where muscles attach to bone, suggest the body was constantly pushed to its limits. Every movement was a negotiation with fatigue and cold, each day a battle against the environment. In addition, the body carried signs of disease exacerbated by the Ice Age. Scarce nutrition weakened immune systems, leaving individuals vulnerable to infections that could become deadly. Lesions on bones indicate that illnesses, often minor in warmer times, were amplified by the harsh climate. Survival required not only skill and cooperation, but also an ability to endure repeated physical challenges that left marks long after recovery. Despite the harshness, the evidence of adaptation is equally remarkable. Healed injuries show resilience, bones mended, and bodies endured. The very human capacity to survive in extreme conditions is inscribed in every skeleton. These remains tell a story of vulnerability and strength, of bodies shaped by frost, famine, and exertion. The ice left its mark, a permanent testament to a world where survival demanded constant vigilance. Each skeleton is a chronicle of endurance, a reminder of the physical cost of life in a frozen landscape. The price of cold was high, but humanity endured, learning, adapting, and pressing forward in the relentless rhythm of the Ice Age. As ice sheets advanced and retreated, the world changed beneath human feet. Landscapes that had once been familiar vanished beneath glaciers, while new paths opened across frozen seas and exposed land bridges. Humanity was on the move, not by choice but by necessity, following the shifting patterns of life, of prey, and of survival itself. The migrations were perilous. Early humans crossed vast expanses of tundra where the cold cut like a knife. Winds swept across open plains, carrying snow and ice that could blind or freeze the unprepared. Mountains rose as barriers and dangers, their peaks hidden in storms. Deserts expanded in interglacial periods, offering little food or water. Every step carried risk. Every journey demanded courage, endurance, and ingenuity. Land bridges became highways of survival. The Bering Strait, a frozen corridor between Asia and North America, allowed humans to move into new continents. Here, the ice revealed paths that would later disappear beneath rising seas. Humans carried with them the knowledge of hunting, shelter, and fire, tools essential for life in unknown territories. Each crossing was an experiment, a gamble with life itself, yet it opened the door to new worlds and new opportunities. Migration was more than movement, it was adaptation in action. Groups observed the behavior of animals, following herds across miles of ice and snow. They learned where edible plants could be found, which rivers provided fresh water, and which valleys offered shelter from storms. Knowledge of terrain and seasons was carried from one generation to the next, forming a living map in the minds of travelers. The journeys shaped human culture and society. Groups were small, intimate, and cooperative, relying on each member for survival. Leaders emerged not by birth but by skill, by the ability to guide the group safely across dangerous lands. Children learned early the rhythms of travel, the signs of weather, and the instincts needed to avoid predators. Each migration strengthened bonds, created shared stories, and reinforced the importance of cooperation. Even as humans moved, the challenges never ended. Food remained scarce, storms could appear without warning, and the cold could claim life in an instant. Yet with each successful migration, humans expanded their range, learned new strategies, and adapted to environments that would have once seemed impossible. The great migrations of the Ice Age were more than journeys of necessity. They were tests of resilience, intelligence, and endurance. They shaped the spread of humanity across continents, laying the foundation for the diversity of landscapes, cultures, and skills that would follow. In every step across frozen plains, every crossing of mountains and deserts, humans learned that survival demanded movement, observation, and courage. The world was vast and often unforgiving, yet they endured, leaving footprints that would echo through time. As Homo sapiens moved westward, they entered a land carved by ice and wind. Europe during the Ice Age was a world of glaciers, tundra, and forests pushed into retreat by advancing sheets of ice. The continent was both a challenge and an opportunity, offering resources, shelter, and the promise of survival for those who could endure its frozen heart. Europe was not empty. Neanderthals had lived here for hundreds of thousands of years, shaped by the relentless cold. Their bodies were stocky and strong, built to conserve heat. Their knowledge of the land was intimate. They understood the behavior of animals, the rhythms of seasons, and the hidden sources of nourishment beneath the snow. Survival had honed them into expert hunters and foragers, masters of a harsh and unyielding world. Homo sapiens arrived with different skills and tools, yet they faced the same unforgiving climate. Their journey into Europe demanded adaptability, observation, and courage. They had to learn the ways of the ice, to track herds across frozen plains, to find shelter in caves, and to manage fire in conditions that could snuff it out in moments. Each day was a negotiation with the cold, a test of endurance against both environment and competition. Encounters with Neanderthals were inevitable. Archaeological evidence suggests that Homo sapiens and Neanderthals overlapped in both time and territory. These interactions may have included conflict, competition for resources, or cautious observation. Clashes were dangerous, but they also drove innovation. Homo sapiens brought refined tools, projectile points, and hunting strategies that allowed them to exploit niches differently than their Neanderthal neighbors. The Ice Age environment shaped every decision. Groups had to move seasonally, following herds and plant cycles. They built temporary shelters, maintained fires, and coordinated hunts over vast distances. Cooperation was essential, as a single failure could mean starvation or death. Knowledge of terrain, weather, and animal behavior became critical, passed from elders to children, forming the foundation of survival strategies in a land of extremes. Europe's frozen heart was both a crucible and a classroom. The harsh conditions forced adaptation and resilience, testing both species in ways that would determine the survival of Homo sapiens. They learned to endure storms, track elusive prey, and navigate unfamiliar landscapes. Every winter was a trial, every hunt a lesson, and every encounter with Neanderthals a reminder that survival demanded intelligence, skill, and persistence. In entering Ice Age Europe, Homo sapiens faced not only the cold but the living challenge of established inhabitants. They had to integrate their knowledge, innovate, and endure. This chapter of migration and adaptation marked a turning point, a period where humans tested themselves against the ice, against the giants of the land, and against one another, forging the resilience that would define our species. Neanderthals were a species forged by the cold. Their bodies were stocky and muscular, designed to conserve heat in harsh glacial climates. Broad chests, short limbs, and dense bones allowed them to survive temperatures that would have tested any human living today. Every aspect of their physiology was tuned to endurance, a living adaptation to a world dominated by ice. But survival required more than bodies built for cold. Neanderthals mastered fire in ways that were essential to life. Fires provided warmth in caves, allowed them to cook meat, and offered protection against predators that prowled the tundra at night. Maintaining a fire was a daily challenge. Wind, snow, and rain could extinguish it in an instant, yet their skill in keeping flames alive was vital, a matter of life and death in the relentless winters. Hunting strategies were equally crucial. Neanderthals targeted large game, such as mammoths, bison, and reindeer. Animals that themselves had adapted to the ice. They coordinated in groups, using ambush tactics, traps, and close-range weapons to bring down prey that often towered over them. This required not only strength but intelligence, communication, and precise timing. Success meant sustenance for the group. Failure could lead to hunger and exposure. Despite their remarkable adaptations, repeated advances of the ice placed Neanderthals under extraordinary pressure. Glaciers expanded, food sources shifted, and landscapes changed faster than their slow reproductive cycles could accommodate. Each ice advance narrowed habitable zones, forcing migrations into less familiar territories and increasing competition for limited resources. Their ability to adapt was tested beyond its limits. Evidence shows that Neanderthal populations began to fragment. Small, isolated groups struggled to find sufficient food and maintain social cohesion. Harsh winters reduced survival rates among the young and elderly. Disease, injury, and malnutrition compounded the stress of environmental change. The ice pressed relentlessly, and for all their skill and resilience, the species could not withstand the combination of climate instability, competition, and dwindling numbers. Interactions with Homo sapiens added another layer of pressure. Modern humans brought new tools, different hunting strategies, and possibly novel social structures. The overlap may have introduced competition for prime hunting grounds and shelter, further straining Neanderthal populations already weakened by the ice. The Neanderthal winter was not just a season. It was an epoch of survival under extreme conditions, a test of endurance against nature and circumstance. Their extinction was gradual, a product of relentless cold, shifting landscapes, and competition. Yet in their bones and artifacts, we see the legacy of adaptation, intelligence, and resilience. Neanderthals remind us that even species finely tuned to their environment can be pushed to the brink when the world itself becomes a force beyond control. Throughout the Ice Ages, humanity faced moments that threatened to erase it entirely. These were periods of extreme cold, scarcity, and environmental upheaval, when vast ice sheets advanced and resources dwindled. Populations shrank, and survival became a struggle not just for individuals, but for entire communities. Genetic evidence tells the story of these bottlenecks. Modern humans carry within them the traces of small, surviving groups, isolated and reduced in number by the harsh realities of the Ice Age. These survivors were often separated by miles of frozen wasteland, living in pockets of habitable land where food and shelter could be found. Each group represented a fragile thread of continuity, a lifeline for the species itself. During these bottlenecks, every birth and death carried immense weight. A single storm, a failed hunt, or a bout of illness could tip a group toward extinction. Survival demanded cooperation, knowledge, and an unyielding will. Families and clans huddled together, sharing warmth, fire, and food. Skills were passed down meticulously, every lesson vital, every memory a potential safeguard against annihilation. Evidence from bones and tools shows that even in these extreme conditions, humans adapted creatively. They hunted with precision, preserved food for lean times, and sought shelter in caves, rock overhangs, and temporary structures. They learned to exploit microenvironments, following herds, gathering edible plants, and tracking seasonal changes. The Ice Age world was a constant challenge, yet ingenuity and resilience allowed small groups to endure. These bottlenecks left lasting marks on the species. Reduced population sizes meant that genetic diversity contracted, creating a legacy of adaptation and vulnerability. Traits that aided survival became concentrated, while others were lost. The human species became a testament to endurance, shaped by moments of crisis as much as by periods of abundance. Even as these bottlenecks occurred, humans pressed onward, migrating to new lands, exploring unfamiliar terrains, and slowly expanding beyond the confines of ice and snow. Each bottleneck strengthened the bonds within groups, reinforced strategies for survival, and honed the skills necessary to endure. The lessons learned during these perilous times were carried forward, passed to the next generation, forming the foundation of resilience that would define our species. The Ice Age tested humanity in ways that few other forces could. In the shadows of glaciers and under the weight of snow, humans teetered on the edge of extinction. Yet, through courage, cooperation, and adaptation, they survived. Bottlenecks were not just moments of crisis, they were crucibles that forged the human species, shaping the course of evolution and ensuring that life endured in a world of endless ice. Survival in the Ice Age demanded more than instinct. Humanity learned to shape the world itself with tools that extended life, preserved warmth, and provided security against the relentless cold. Stone blades became essential instruments, sharp and versatile, capable of cutting meat, scraping hides, and crafting other tools. They were precise, durable, and reliable, each one a lifeline in a frozen landscape. Needles made from bone allowed humans to transform animal skins into clothing suited for extreme conditions. These early garments were not simply coverings, they were engineered for survival. Layered, tailored, and fitted to the body, they preserved heat, repelled wind, and protected against frostbite. Each stitch represented knowledge passed down, lessons learned from generations that had felt the harsh sting of winter. Shelters evolved alongside clothing. Humans discovered the strategic use of caves and rock overhangs, then progressed to constructed dwellings reinforced with bones, hides, and branches. These shelters provided refuge from storms that could appear without warning, from snow that piled meters deep, and from winds that cut through thin layers of clothing. Inside, fires were maintained carefully, their smoke vented to avoid suffocation, while providing warmth that could mean the difference between life and death. Every innovation represented a battle against time and the environment. Ice sheets advanced and retreated in cycles, threatening to erase unprepared communities. Tools allowed humans to adapt quickly, to exploit fleeting opportunities, and to survive winters that could last months. Stone points improved hunting efficiency, sewing skills ensured warmth, and shelters created stability in a world of constant change. Cooperation was essential in the use of these tools. Hunting large game required coordinated strategies and shared labor. Preparing hides, sewing clothing, and building shelters involved every member of the group. Knowledge of tool use and craftsmanship was taught meticulously, from elders to children, embedding survival skills into the culture itself. These innovations also shaped human mobility. With proper clothing, portable shelters, and durable tools, small groups could move across landscapes, follow migrating herds, and exploit diverse ecosystems. The Ice Age was not just a time of survival, but of strategic adaptation, where every tool extended human presence and influence in the environment. Through the combined power of ingenuity and collaboration, humans endured what the ice tried to erase. Blades, needles, and shelters were more than objects. They were extensions of the human mind and body, instruments that transformed vulnerability into resilience. In a world defined by freezing nights and scarce resources, tools became the bridge between life and extinction, allowing humanity to persist, adapt, and ultimately thrive against the clock of the Ice Age. Even in the depths of Ice Age winters, humans found ways to express themselves. Cave walls became galleries, illuminated by flickering firelight, showcasing animals, symbols, and abstract patterns. These paintings were not mere decoration. They were acts of communication, storytelling, and connection, preserving knowledge and memory in a world where survival was never guaranteed. Carvings on bone, antler, and stone reveal a similar impulse. Small figures of animals, humans, and hybrid forms were meticulously crafted, demonstrating patience, skill, and imagination. Each piece represented time taken away from immediate survival, a deliberate investment in culture and cognition. These objects suggest that humans were not only surviving physically, but sustaining their minds and spirits under extraordinary pressure. Rituals accompanied this creative expression. Offerings, symbolic arrangements of stones, and painted handprints in secluded chambers indicate a belief in forces beyond immediate perception. They may have sought favor from the animals they hunted, protection from harsh climates, or guidance through uncertain landscapes. These acts of ritual and artistry show that even under extreme cold, humans sought meaning and agency in a world that often seemed indifferent. Art served another practical function as well. It codified knowledge, teaching hunting strategies, seasonal patterns, and social rules. Images of bison, horses, and mammoths may have been visual guides, instructing the young on prey identification, tracking techniques, and the dangers of large animals. Symbols and patterns may have marked territory, seasonal sites, or communal identity, strengthening cohesion among scattered groups facing the ice. The persistence of creativity in such conditions is remarkable. When temperatures dropped, food was scarce, and life hung in the balance. Humans still carried pigments, carved tools, and planned images with care. Art became a defiance of darkness, a statement that even in the coldest centuries, humanity's mind could imagine, remember, and aspire. These expressions also reinforced social bonds. Creating together, observing together, and performing rituals nurtured a sense of community, shared purpose, and continuity. In the freezing nights, storytelling and symbolism offered comfort, reinforcing the idea that survival was not only physical, but cultural and emotional. Art in the darkness reminds us that humanity's earliest triumphs were not only about meat, fire, and shelter. They were about imagination, collaboration, and spirit. Even when the ice pressed relentlessly, humans left traces of thought, wonder, and creativity. These marks testify that survival was never only about enduring the cold, but about sustaining the mind, the heart, and the essence of being human amidst the harshest conditions Earth could offer. 26,000 years ago, the world reached the peak of its icy grip. The last glacial maximum stretched across continents, pushing ice sheets farther than ever before. Mountains wore thick caps of white. Valleys were buried beneath frozen expanses, and rivers followed unpredictable courses beneath layers of ice. Humanity faced a planet transformed, a landscape both majestic and merciless. Sea levels dropped dramatically, nearly 400 feet below modern levels, exposing land bridges that linked continents. These bridges became crucial pathways, allowing small groups to migrate, search for food, and escape the most inhospitable zones. Yet the land itself was harsh. Winds whipping unrelentingly across barren plains, and snowfall accumulating to heights that made travel and hunting exhausting and dangerous. Survival depended on ingenuity and adaptation. Clothing grew more complex, layered garments of hide, fur, and sinew protecting skin from frostbite. Fire became central to every activity, warming shelters, cooking food, and warding off predators. Stone tools were sharpened and diversified, designed for hunting, cutting, and scraping in ways that minimized energy expenditure while maximizing results. Even the smallest advantage could mean life or death. Food was scarce and seasonal. Herds of megafauna roamed open tundra, but their movements were unpredictable. Humans had to track these animals across vast distances, coordinating hunts with precision and care. Gathering plant foods required deep knowledge of seasonal growth, storage techniques, and edible varieties. Every meal was a calculated effort, and missed opportunities could spell starvation for entire families or clans. Isolation was common. Ice divided communities, and groups became small and insular, relying on tight bonds to survive. Knowledge was shared carefully. Lessons from elders preserved and passed to the next generation. Children learned tracking, tool use, and fire management as essential skills. The smallest error in judgment could have catastrophic consequences, emphasizing the delicate balance between survival and extinction. Despite the harsh conditions, humans persisted, demonstrating resilience and flexibility. Populations shifted, merged, and split as opportunities arose. Some groups ventured into new territories, adapting to unfamiliar climates, while others fortified familiar lands against both cold and predators. The Ice Age forced constant innovation and cooperation, shaping culture, technology, and social organization. The apex of cold left lasting marks on humanity. Bodies adapted to conserve heat. Cultures evolved around mobility and resourcefulness, and communities formed strategies to endure prolonged scarcity. The last glacial maximum was not merely a period of survival. It was a crucible that forged the strength, intelligence, and creativity of Homo sapiens. In the shadow of colossal ice sheets, humanity endured, demonstrating that even in the most extreme conditions, life could persist, adapt, and lay the foundation for the world to come. In the depths of the Ice Age, food was never guaranteed. Harsh winters, shifting glaciers, and unpredictable migrations of game meant that human communities lived constantly on the edge. Scarcity defined every decision, every journey, every plan for survival. When herds moved, humans followed. When snow blocked familiar paths, entire groups were forced to seek new territories. Starvation was never theoretical. It was a threat that could descend without warning. Famines were cyclical, tied to climate, seasons, and chance. A failed hunt could mean days without meat, forcing reliance on roots, seeds, and what little vegetation remained beneath the snow. Extended cold could destroy storage, spoil preserved meat, or freeze water sources. Every shortage tested the ingenuity and resilience of communities. Survival was not only about skill but about anticipation, preparation, and the ability to adapt quickly. Competition intensified during these lean periods. Groups competed for hunting grounds, river access, and shelter. Territory became crucial, and boundaries were fiercely defended. Encounters could turn violent, with disputes over resources escalating into raids or prolonged conflict. Tools and weapons, already essential for hunting, became instruments of defense and assertion. Survival required not just endurance but strategy, diplomacy, and sometimes force. Yet competition was only one side of the story. Cooperation was equally vital. Hunting large game, such as mammoths or bison, required coordination and planning. Sharing meat, distributing labor, and pooling knowledge allowed groups to survive when individuals alone could not. Fire, a constant companion, became a communal resource, a center for cooking, warmth, and protection. Maintaining a fire through the coldest nights demanded collective effort, vigilance, and trust among members of the group. Scarcity also shaped culture and social structure. Rules of sharing, reciprocity, and mutual protection emerged organically, ensuring that the group could survive even when resources ran low. Elders guided the young, teaching them not just how to track or hunt, but how to respect limits, read the landscape, and preserve life in ways that extended beyond the immediate moment. Knowledge itself became a resource, as valuable as meat or shelter, passed carefully through generations. Fires had a dual role. They were warmth and sustenance, but also signals and protection. Smoke could mark territory, warn distant groups, or lure animals toward hunters. Fire transformed landscapes, cleared snow, and even drove game into traps or ambushes. Mastery of fire allowed humans to manipulate their environment in ways that could tip the balance in moments of scarcity, turning potential famine into survival. Despite constant pressure, humans endured, communities expanded, migrated, and innovated, learning to navigate the delicate balance between cooperation and competition. Scarcity tested relationships, forged alliances, and revealed weaknesses. Hunger could bring conflict, but it also inspired ingenuity, strategy, and a profound understanding of the land. The Ice Age was a world of extremes, where famine and fire existed side by side. One threatened life, the other preserved it. Human survival was never assured, yet time and again, communities adapted. Scarcity shaped not only bodies and diets but minds and societies. Famines and fires were not merely events, they were forces that defined the rhythm of life, teaching lessons of endurance, collaboration, and resilience that would echo for generations to come. As the ice began to retreat, the world slowly transformed. Glaciers that had once dominated the horizon melted, their immense weight retreating to reveal valleys, rivers, and plains, long hidden beneath ice and snow. Water surged through newly carved channels, carving fertile riverbeds and depositing nutrient-rich sediments. The landscape shifted from stark and frozen to a mosaic of wetlands, grasslands, and forests. Humanity, shaped by millennia of survival under extreme cold, found itself facing both challenge and opportunity. The rhythm of life changed. Rivers, swollen by meltwater, became highways for fish and other aquatic resources, while grasslands spread across regions once barren. Herbivores followed the new growth, and with them came predators and the promise of sustenance for human hunters. Mobility remained essential, but the environment now offered a broader range of food sources and more predictable seasonal patterns. For the first time in tens of thousands of years, humans could consider not only survival but planning, observation, and manipulation of the land. With opportunity came innovation. Early humans began to experiment with the plants around them, noticing which seeds sprouted where and which roots could be stored for later use. Observation led to trial and error led to understanding. People learned to recognize patterns in plant growth, timing, and reproduction. It was subtle at first, small actions, moving seeds closer to dwellings, protecting favored plants from animals, scattering them near water sources. These seemingly simple acts laid the groundwork for the agricultural revolution that would come millennia later. The environment itself shaped behavior. Communities settled near rivers and fertile plains, constructing more permanent shelters and revisiting familiar hunting grounds season after season. Campsites became semi-permanent, hearths burned longer, and knowledge accumulated. The ice had forced humans to adapt quickly, but the thaw rewarded patience, observation, and cooperation. Shared knowledge of plant cycles, animal behavior, and seasonal shifts became essential for survival and prosperity. Social structures began to respond to these new opportunities. Groups that could organize hunting, gathering, and protection of resources thrived. Leadership was often practical, based on skill and experience rather than force alone. Communication intensified, strategies for cooperation became more sophisticated, and the sense of community deepened. These were the first stirrings of social complexity tied directly to environmental change. Even as life improved, the ice left its mark. Scarcity had taught vigilance, patience, and adaptability. Humans retained the lessons of survival from the coldest epochs. Yet now, these skills could be applied to shaping the environment rather than merely enduring it. Rivers were monitored, animal migrations anticipated, and plant growth guided. The thaw offered a promise, but it demanded attention and care. The first seeds of change were not merely literal but symbolic. They represented the first conscious steps toward altering the world to serve human needs. By observing, experimenting, and cooperating, humans began to assert influence over their surroundings in ways previously unimaginable. The melting glaciers reshaped the land, and humanity, ever resilient, reshaped itself. It was a moment of cautious optimism, a recognition that the relentless ice had passed and a new era of possibility awaited. In these river valleys and fertile plains, humanity began to imagine a world where survival did not always mean constant struggle. The seeds were sown, both in soil and in human ingenuity. What emerged from these first efforts would define the trajectory of civilization for thousands of years to come. The ice receded, but the lessons endured, and with them, the first true stirrings of transformation. As the ice sheets receded and temperatures rose, the world transformed at a pace that few living creatures could endure. Landscapes once dominated by glaciers became open plains, wetlands, and forests, but these changes came with costs. The giant creatures that had roamed the frozen world, the mammoths, the woolly rhinos, the giant deer, and other megafauna found their habitats shrinking. The cold-adapted ecosystems that had supported them for millennia disappeared, replaced by new plant communities, changing rivers, and spreading forests. Many species could not adjust quickly enough. Humans, small but adaptable, were a constant presence in this shifting world. Hunting strategies that had once been difficult became more effective against creatures now constrained by changing environments. Mammoths, once scattered across vast tundras, were forced into smaller ranges. Herds thinned. Calves became more vulnerable, and natural reproduction struggled to keep pace with predation. Similarly, reindeer and other large herbivores faced new pressures. Seasonal migrations changed, food sources shifted, and some populations collapsed entirely. The loss of these giants reshaped ecosystems. Predators that relied on megafauna had to adapt or face starvation. Smaller herbivores proliferated, consuming new growth in ways that further altered the balance of plants and soil. The collapse of these keystone species created cascading effects. Wetlands drained or transformed, grasslands expanded, and forests encroached into areas that had once been open tundra. Every shift in animal populations reverberated through the environment, and humans observed, learned, and adapted alongside these changes. Yet the extinctions were not purely environmental. Human ingenuity and persistence amplified the pressure. Cooperative hunting strategies, the use of spears, traps, and eventually organized drives, allowed humans to exploit remaining megafauna more efficiently. Fires were used to drive animals into kill zones, and carcasses were thoroughly scavenged for meat, hide, and bone. As humans spread into new territories, their impact grew. Extinctions were a combination of climate stress and human agency, intertwined in a deadly dance. The disappearance of these great creatures forced humans to adapt further. Diets diversified. Small game, fish, and plant resources became more critical. Communities learned to track and preserve seasonal plants, store food for lean periods, and develop technologies to process smaller, tougher animals. Survival no longer relied on sheer strength or the luck of a big kill. It required observation, planning, and cooperation at an unprecedented level. The psychological and cultural impact of extinctions cannot be underestimated. For millennia, humans had coexisted with giants that dwarfed them, creatures that defined the landscapes they navigated. Their disappearance altered the stories, rituals, and art of early societies. Cave paintings and carvings shifted focus, depicting smaller animals or abstract symbols, reflecting a world no longer dominated by immense beasts. Extinctions in the thaw were both an ending and a beginning. They marked the close of the Ice Age megafauna era and the rise of ecosystems that would shape human evolution and behavior. Survival required innovation, foresight, and adaptation. Humans endured, not because the giants survived, but because they could read the signs of a changing world and respond. In the shadow of loss, humanity found new paths, laying the foundations for the societies and landscapes we would inherit in the millennia to come. The great creatures vanished, but the lessons remained. Observation, cooperation, and adaptability became essential. As ice melted and forests spread, humans became the dominant force in a world reshaped by both climate and their own relentless ingenuity. The age of giants ended, and a new chapter of human persistence began. As the glaciers receded and the world warmed, vast new landscapes opened to human exploration. Fertile valleys, lake shores, and winding river basins became havens for groups that had survived the harshest centuries of the ice. These places offered food, water, and shelter in abundance previously unimaginable. Humans followed the rivers as lifelines, tracing paths of fresh water, fish, and edible plants. Floodplains revealed rich soils, and the gentle slopes of valleys provided defensible locations and natural windbreaks. In these refuges, survival was no longer a matter of scraping by in frozen wastelands. It became an opportunity for renewal, for communities to stabilize, grow, and experiment. Humans began to refine their tools and strategies with a focus on efficiency and versatility. Stone blades were shaped with unprecedented precision. Harpoons and fishing tools allowed exploitation of rivers and lakes. Bone needles and awls enabled the creation of fitted clothing and insulated footwear, essential for transitional climates. Wooden spears, bows, and traps became more sophisticated, reflecting a deep understanding of local ecosystems. Knowledge accumulated over generations, passed orally and practically, allowed groups to anticipate seasonal changes and plan hunts, foraging, and migrations with foresight. The abundance of these refuges also encouraged social innovation. Groups settled for longer periods, creating semi-permanent camps. Knowledge of plant cycles led to early experimentation with storage and preservation. People learned to dry meat, store nuts and seeds, and prepare roots for long-term consumption. Shared labor became more effective, with coordinated hunting drives and communal construction of shelters. These developments strengthened social bonds, and groups could support more vulnerable members, the elderly, children, and those recovering from injury. Cooperation was no longer just a survival tactic, it became a social imperative. Refuges also facilitated cultural and artistic growth. Cave walls, rock overhangs, and open-air shelters became canvases for expression. Paintings depicted animals, humans, and abstract symbols. Carvings on bone and antler recorded stories, knowledge, and rituals. These creative acts were intertwined with survival, helping maintain morale, cohesion, and identity. Art became a tool for understanding the world, teaching younger members, and reinforcing collective memory. Environmental abundance, however, was always tempered by caution. Seasonal flooding, storms, and unpredictable weather reminded humans that the Ice Age rhythms were not gone but merely altered. Groups learned to read the land. The height of riverbanks, the migration of birds, the emergence of early vegetation. These observations guided settlement locations, hunting strategies, and resource management. Humans became stewards of their immediate environment, shaping the land through fire, selective hunting, and the careful use of materials for shelter and tools. As populations expanded within these refuges, human communities became more interconnected. Trade and exchange of materials, tools, and knowledge fostered networks across valleys and basins. Cultural innovations spread, ideas multiplied, and human resilience strengthened. The ice had forced humanity to endure, but the thaw offered a new era of opportunity. Refuge and renewal marked a turning point. The harsh lessons of the ice were not forgotten, but they were balanced with hope and experimentation. Humans learned to harness abundance while respecting scarcity, to innovate while preserving knowledge, and to create communities capable of thriving in the wake of catastrophe. In these fertile landscapes, the foundations for agriculture, permanent settlements, and complex societies were quietly forming. Survival was no longer enough. Humans were beginning to flourish. The glaciers may have receded, but their influence remained etched in memory and adaptation. Humanity had endured the ice, and now, in these valleys, beside rivers and lakes, a new chapter of ingenuity, cooperation, and resilience was taking root. The Pleistocene was ending. Ice sheets that had dominated continents for tens of thousands of years were retreating. Rivers swelled with meltwater, carving new valleys and expanding lakes. Forests advanced over tundra, grasses spread across open plains, and the climate, though still unpredictable, offered warmth where once there had been endless cold. Humanity had endured cycles of ice and fire, famine and feast, and now stood at the threshold of a new epoch, the Holocene. The lessons of survival were deeply etched in human culture and biology. Bodies hardened by cold, bones shaped by repeated labor, and minds sharpened by constant observation of the environment. Small groups that had clung to life in isolated refuges were now able to explore broader territories. Migration gave way to settlement, but settlement was informed by millennia of adaptation. Humans had learned to read the rhythms of rivers, the patterns of animal migrations, and the cycles of plant growth. Knowledge that had once meant the difference between life and death now became the foundation for innovation. Communities began to flourish in ways impossible during the Ice Age. Fertile valleys and river basins supported larger populations. Tools and technologies, refined over countless generations, enabled humans to exploit resources more effectively. Stone blades and bone implements became specialized, hunting strategies more coordinated, and storage techniques allowed food to survive beyond the season. Clothing, shelter, and fire management improved comfort and safety, giving people the freedom to experiment, create, and plan beyond immediate survival. Social structures evolved alongside environmental opportunity. Cooperation, essential in frozen landscapes, now allowed for the division of labor, skill specialization, and the development of collective memory. Elders transmitted accumulated knowledge. Rituals and art flourished, giving meaning to experience and reinforcing bonds. Communities, while still vulnerable, were becoming resilient. They were no longer solely at the mercy of ice and scarcity. They had learned to manipulate their environment, to shape it, to survive within it. Yet, the end of the ice did not erase its shadow. Scarcity, danger, and the need for cooperation had left marks on the human psyche. Early humans carried caution, adaptability, and foresight into this new world. They remembered the edge of starvation, the terror of blizzards, the terror of predators, and the fragility of life. These experiences forged a species capable of remarkable ingenuity, patient planning, and enduring resilience. Every step into the Holocene was informed by millennia of Ice Age survival. The retreat of glaciers also revealed new opportunities that would soon redefine human existence. Fertile soils, abundant fresh water, and predictable seasons created conditions suitable for experimentation with plant cultivation and animal domestication. Populations could settle for longer periods, gradually transforming mobility into permanence. Communities that had survived on the knife edge of climate now faced a future of growth, innovation, and complexity. The stage was set for the next revolution: farming, cities, and civilization itself. As humans stepped into the Holocene, they carried the scars of ice, yet also its strength. They had endured the coldest, harshest epoch in their history, and emerged adaptable, observant, and prepared. The ice had tested them, shaped them, and hardened them. In every valley, beside every river, and across every open plain, humanity began to claim its place in a world no longer ruled entirely by frost. The exit from ice was not just a physical journey, it was the culmination of endurance, innovation, and survival. The Pleistocene ended, but its legacy lived on in every human heartbeat, in every stone tool, in every pattern of movement across the land. The Holocene would demand new strategies, new courage, and new visions. Humanity, forged by ice, was ready. The age of glaciers was over, but the story of human ingenuity, resilience, and ambition was only beginning.